They said I had 30 days to abandon my family's ranch. No warning, no mercy, just a lawyer's cold threat. Vacate or we'll take it. But when I saw Karen Whitmore marching across my land with blueprints to demolish my home, I knew this wasn't about legal paperwork. This was war. By sundown, her son would be measuring my barn for his mansion, and I discovered just how far a perfect neighbor would go to steal everything I loved. The phone rang loudly in my living room, echoing across the wide walls of my ranch house. I had just come back from feeding the horses when I picked it up, expecting it to be a neighbor or maybe my sister. Instead, it was a voice I didn't recognize. A man's voice, cold and sharp. "Mr. Dawson," he asked. "Speaking," I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. "This is attorney Richard Hayes. I represent Mrs. Karen Whitmore. She's requesting that you vacate your property within 30 days. Her son Daniel needs it urgently for his future family. You are not being given a choice. We are prepared to take legal action if necessary." I nearly dropped the phone. "Excuse me," I said, thinking I heard wrong. "You heard me. Mrs. Whitmore's son is getting married next month. They have decided that your ranch is best suited for them. They expect you to move out peacefully, otherwise we'll move to evict you." I stood there stunned, staring at the dusty boots by my door, trying to understand if this was some sick joke. "My property isn't even in an HOA," I said slowly. "I own this land outright. According to Mrs. Whitmore, the original deeds are being reviewed, and she claims the land falls under their association rights. You will be hearing from us officially soon." He snapped before hanging up. I stood there with the dial tone buzzing in my ear. That was when I noticed something even worse. Out the big window facing the pasture, I saw Karen Whitmore herself, a short woman with perfectly curled blonde hair, wearing a pink jogging suit, walking boldly onto my land with a clipboard in her hand. And right behind her, two men in suits surveying my barn like they already owned it. My heart raced. I dropped the phone on the couch and stormed outside. "What do you think you're doing, Karen?" I shouted across the yard. Karen gave me the fakest smile I had ever seen in my life, as if we were old friends catching up over coffee. "Just checking the property for future improvements. Mason," she sang out sweetly. "You'll be out soon enough. Best to make sure everything is ready for my Daniel." I was halfway across the yard when one of the men, a taller guy with a clipboard, started marking things down. The barn, the stables, even my old well that had been on the ranch since the 1800s. "Stop right there," I barked. "You're trespassing." Karen just chuckled and pointed to the edge of my driveway where she had propped up a shiny new sign. "Future home of Daniel Madison Whitmore." The nerve, the absolute audacity. Before I could even think about what to do next, the shorter of the two men pulled a rolled-up blueprint from a leather bag and unrolled it right on the hood of his car. A full design for tearing down my barn and building a brand new modern mansion. I could hardly breathe. My vision was going red. And just then, a pickup truck I didn't recognize came rumbling up the driveway. And out hopped Daniel himself, a young man with slicked back hair and a cocky grin, holding a sparkling engagement ring box in one hand. "Mason," he called out like we were buddies. "Appreciate you clearing out for me, man. Madison, and I owe you big time." I froze in my tracks. I had never agreed to give up my land. I hadn't signed anything and sure as heck wasn't going anywhere. But Daniel was walking up to me now, hand outstretched like I was supposed to shake it and congratulate him. My hands balled into fists at my sides. I was about to tell him exactly where he could shove that ring box when Karen snapped her fingers loudly. And the two men in suits started walking toward my front door, looking like they were about to go inside without my permission. I sprinted toward the porch, heart pounding like a war drum, as Daniel and Karen shouted after me about new beginnings and building a family legacy. I didn't know it yet, but what happened next would set off a chain of events crazier than anything I had ever seen in my life. And it all started with the sound of my front door creaking open. I hit the porch steps two at a time, my boots thudding hard against the old wood. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. I didn't know if I was more angry or scared. All I knew was there were strangers opening my front door, my home, like they had the right. Hey, get away from my house, I roared. The two suited men froze for a second, startled. One of them had his hand on the doorknob. He glanced at Karen, who waved him on with a smug little smirk, like she owned the place. She doesn't own this house. I shouted at them. You're trespassing. This is illegal. The shorter man mumbled something under his breath. Something about surveying rights, but I didn't care. I reached the porch, yanked the front door shut with a loud bang, and planted myself firmly in front of it. You step 1 foot inside my house, I said, my voice shaking with anger, and you're going to regret it. For a moment, nobody moved. Even Karen seemed caught off guard. Maybe she thought I would just roll over and take it. Not a chance. Daniel shrugged and said, Come on, old man. Don't make this hard. We'll give you a week to pack your stuff. 2 if you're slow. I stared at him in disbelief. Was he serious? This wasn't just some bad dream. It was happening right here on my own land. I clenched my fists so tight my knuckles turned white. Every instinct in me screamed to throw them all off my porch, but I knew better. One wrong move and they would call the cops, twist the story, and somehow make it my fault. I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down. You have 30 seconds, I said coldly, to get off my land before I call the sheriff. Karen gasped like I had slapped her. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. Daniel just laughed, pulling out his phone. Go ahead. Sheriff's in our pocket anyway. That made my blood boil even hotter. Lies stacked on top of lies. But I didn't let it show. I pulled out my own phone and started dialing right in front of them. Karen's smile wobbled. Daniel's laughter faded. The two suited men shifted nervously. They weren't as confident as they acted. Before I could hit call, Karen finally broke. Fine, she barked. We'll go for now. But this isn't over, Mason. You will hear from our lawyer again. She turned on her heel, stomping off the porch like a spoiled kid who didn't get their way. Daniel followed, still muttering about ungrateful geezers. The two men packed up their blueprints and clipboards and trudged after them. I stood there until they were all the way back in their cars. I waited until their engines roared to life, and they drove down my long gravel driveway, kicking up dust behind them. Only when the last car disappeared did I finally let out a breath. The ranch was quiet again. The horses down by the stable were grazing peacefully, unaware that a storm had just passed, or maybe just begun. I sat heavily down on the porch steps, my legs suddenly weak. What had just happened? Karen Whitmore, my crazy HOA neighbor who I barely even spoke to, had actually tried to steal my land for her son, and she had hired a lawyer to try and force me out. The thing was, Karen had always been a little pushy. She ran the HOA like it was her personal kingdom, barking at people about their grass length, their fence paint, mailbox designs. But she had never crossed the line onto my property before. I had always thought I was safe because my ranch technically wasn't part of the HOA. Now it looked like Karen had decided rules didn't matter anymore. Not when her precious son needed a shiny new home. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the sweat and dust clinging to my skin. I needed help, a plan. But first, I needed proof. I pulled out my phone again and opened the camera. I took pictures of everything. The sign Karen had planted at the end of my driveway, the tire tracks from her visitors' cars, even the marks they had made on the blueprints they had left behind by accident on the porch swing. Evidence. If Karen wanted a fight, she was going to get one. But smart, legal, bulletproof. Not the wild, angry revenge my heart wanted. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. The ranch looked peaceful, but I knew it was just the calm before the real storm. I went back inside and locked the door. I checked every window and every back door twice, making sure everything was secure. I even closed the heavy wooden shutters my grandfather had built decades ago, back when this land was more isolated and you couldn't always trust who came knocking. It felt a little silly, locking up like there was a war coming. But my gut told me it was the right thing to do. Just as I was about to call it a night, my phone buzzed again. A text from a number I didn't recognize. You can't stop us. Daniel deserves that wrench. Prepare to lose everything. No signature, but I didn't need one. I knew exactly who it was from. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. Karen wasn't just playing games anymore. She was serious. That night, every creak of the wrench sounded like Karen's lawyer at the door. But by dawn, I had a plan, one that would turn county records into a weapon. The next morning, I drove straight into town. My hands shook as I pulled into the records office. 20 years of deed payments, tax stamps, grandpa's sweat in every fence post, all reduced to a clerk's board sigh. If Karen's lies lived here, I'd burn this building down myself. Inside, the air smelled like paper and coffee. A bored-looking clerk named Debbie sat behind the counter. "Can I help you?" she asked, flipping through a magazine. "I need property records," I said, "for 412 Crescent Ranch Road." She sighed and slid a clipboard across the counter. "Fill this out." I did, tapping my pen nervously against the wood. Debbie disappeared into the back for what felt like forever, then returned carrying a thick file. "This is all we've got," she said, plopping it onto the counter. I flipped it open and scanned the papers inside. My heart pounded as I found what I was looking for. The original deed, my name, plain as day. Mason Dawson. No mention of an HOA. No restrictions. Transfer clauses. Nothing. This land was mine, period. Relief washed over me like a cool breeze. I wasn't crazy or powerless. But before I could celebrate too much, Debbie cleared her throat. "You're not the first one to come asking about that property this week," she said casually. I looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "Couple days ago, some lady came by. Blonde, fancy clothes, smelled like a perfume shop exploded. She asked if there was any way to reassign property deeds to family members in the HOA. I gritted my teeth. Karen, of course it was Karen. And I asked. Debbie laughed. I told her, no, this is America, not some banana republic. I smiled for the first time that day. Thanks, Debbie. You probably saved me a world of trouble. She winked at me. Just doing my job, hun. Good luck. Feeling better, I left the office with a spring in my step. I had the papers now. Proof that Karen didn't have a legal leg to stand on. But as I stepped into the sunlight, my phone buzzed again. Another text. "You think a little paperwork will save you? We're already working on Plan B." My stomach twisted. What did that mean? I didn't have to wait long to find out. When I got back to the ranch, a giant moving truck was parked in my driveway, and standing proudly next to it was Daniel, arms crossed, sunglasses on, grinning like he had already won. Behind him stood Karen, holding a sparkling welcome home banner, and in the back of the truck, furniture, boxes, even a brand new baby crib. They had brought everything. They were planning to move in today. For a moment, I just stood there staring. It felt like I had stepped into some crazy alternate universe where people thought stealing someone's house was as easy as borrowing sugar from a neighbor. Karen waved the big shiny welcome home banner like she was at a parade. Daniel leaned against the moving truck, looking proud like he had earned this land instead of scheming for it. When Daniel saw me, he pushed off the truck and called out, "You're just in time, Mason. You can help us unload." I clenched my fist so tight my nails dug into my palms. I had to think smart, fast. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose it. I walked slowly up the driveway, my boots crunching the gravel underfoot. "What are you doing here?" I asked calmly, even though my voice shook. Karen beamed like a mother showing off a science fair trophy. "We're moving in. Daniel and Madison are starting their life here. It's a perfect fit. And don't worry, Mason. Once you're out of the way, we'll even put a nice little plaque on the barn to honor you. Former owner. Isn't that sweet?" Sweet wasn't the word I was thinking. "What part of no did you not understand?" I said. Daniel laughed. Man, stop being so selfish. You're old. You've had your time. It's our turn now. I took a deep breath. You have no legal claim to this land, I said, holding up the property papers I had picked up from the county office. This ranch is mine. Karen's smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew wider, like a cat watching a trapped mouse. We'll see about that, she said smugly. You might own the dirt, Mason, but we control everything else. Water rights, road access, power permits. You're going to find it very hard to live here when we turn all of that off. My blood ran cold. Could they actually do that? Karen saw the hesitation in my face and moved in for the kill. I already have the HOA board working on it. Once we file the complaints, you'll be fined so much you won't have a choice but to leave. Daniel nodded. You can fight if you want, old man, but you're just wasting your time and money. The moving men started pulling boxes off the truck, carrying them toward my house like they had every right. I felt a rage boil up inside me, hotter than anything I'd ever felt before. But I kept my cool, barely. You're trespassing, I said, my voice dangerously low. Every box you put on my land is one more charge against you. Every step you take toward my front door is another crime. Karen laughed like she thought I was bluffing. Big mistake. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I made sure to get Karen, Daniel, the movers, the banner, the truck, everything. This is proof, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Proof you're trespassing. Proof you're trying to steal my home. Karen's smile wobbled. She hadn't expected that. But Daniel doubled down. You're pathetic, old man. No judge will listen to you. We'll just say you invited us to stay. We'll say you promised it to us before you lost your mind. That was when I knew, really knew, that they weren't going to stop until they destroyed me. And right then, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just defend myself. I was going to fight back. But first, I needed backup. I turned and walked back to my truck without another word. Daniel jeered behind me. Karen called out, "Run along now, Mason. It's almost nap time for old folks." I ignored them. Once inside my truck, I locked the doors and called the sheriff's office. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Sheriff's Department?" "This is Mason Dawson out at Crescent Ranch Road," I said quickly. "I need an officer here immediately. I have trespassers trying to move into my home without permission." There was a pause, then, "Copy that. Deputies are on their way. Sit tight, sir." I hung up and watched the movers carry a full-size mattress toward my porch. Not for long, I thought grimly. Not for long. 15 minutes later, two sheriff's cruisers came tearing down the driveway, lights flashing. Daniel's face paled. Karen dropped her banner. The movers froze like deer caught in headlights. I got out of the truck and waved the officers over. A tall deputy named Carter, who I'd known for years, stepped out of his car. "Mason, what's going on?" he asked, eyeing the scene warily. I handed him my phone. "Video evidence. They're trespassing, trying to move into my house." Carter watched a few seconds of the footage, then nodded grimly. He turned to Karen, who was trying to look innocent. "Ma'am, you and your party need to leave this property immediately." Karen's mouth dropped open like a fish gasping for air. But this land should belong to my son. He deserves it." Carter's face didn't change. "That's not how property law works. This isn't a negotiation. You're trespassing, and if you don't vacate now, you'll be arrested." Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, but one look at Carter's hand resting near his holster made him think better of it. The movers practically ran back to the truck, tossing boxes inside without any care. Karen stomped her foot like a toddler. "This isn't fair. This isn't over." Carter walked toward her slowly. "It'll be over when you leave, ma'am. And if you step foot back here without a court order, you'll be spending the night in jail." With one last glare at me, Karen climbed into Daniel's truck. The moving van followed. And just like that, they were gone again, leaving behind a mess of tire tracks, broken dreams, and a battered welcome home banner flapping sadly in the dirt. I sagged against my truck, exhausted but relieved. Carter came over and clapped me on the shoulder. "You good, Mason?" I nodded. "For now. Thanks, Carter." He gave me a small smile. "Don't let them scare you. You've got the law on your side." "I know," I said, "but something tells me they're not done yet." Carter's smile faded. "Just keep your head up and call us if they try anything again." After he left, I spent the next few hours cleaning up the mess Karen and her goons had left behind. It felt good taking back control, even if it was just sweeping my porch and gathering up the garbage they had dropped. But deep down, I knew the battle wasn't over. Karen wasn't the kind of person to give up. Sure enough, as the sun dipped low and the stars began to peek out, another text came through. "You think you won today? Just wait. We're playing the long game." I stared at the message for a long moment, my fists clenching again. Karen was planning something worse, and next time it might not be just a moving truck. It might be something much bigger, something I wasn't ready for yet. The next morning started quiet, too quiet. No trucks, no shouting, no Karen on my lawn, just the soft sound of birds and the distant whinny of horses in the stable. For a few hours, it almost felt normal. I fixed myself some coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the sun rise over the fields. The ranch looked beautiful, golden light spilling over the hills, the old oak trees casting long shadows. I told myself, maybe, just maybe, Karen had gotten the message. Maybe she had finally realized she couldn't bully me off my own land. Maybe the storm was over. But deep down, I knew better. Karen Whitmore wasn't the type to accept defeat. Around 10 o'clock, my answer came loud and clear. A sharp knocking rattled my front door. I grabbed my coffee and opened it cautiously, half expecting Karen herself to be standing there with another fake smile. Instead, a man in a bright orange vest and a hard hat stood on my porch holding a clipboard. "Morning," he said. "I'm here with Ridgeview Utilities. Got orders to disconnect your water." I blinked. "What?" I asked, thinking I misheard. He flipped through his clipboard. "Yep. Says here, non-payment of HOA fees, scheduled shutoff." I stared at him in disbelief. "I'm not part of the HOA." He shrugged like it didn't matter to him. "I just got the order. Gotta shut it off unless you can show me proof it's a mistake." I fumbled for my phone, pulling up the deed and showing him. He scratched his head. "Huh, weird. You might want to take this up with the HOA office, but, orders are orders." He stepped off the porch and headed toward the water main. Panic surged in my chest. Without water, the whole ranch would suffer. The horses, the crops, me. I couldn't let that happen. I jogged after him. "Wait, at least give me time to fix this." The man hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, buddy, I'm just doing my job. I'll give you till the end of the day. But if I don't hear back, I've got to shut it off." I nodded, heart pounding. "Thank you, I'll fix it." He gave me a sympathetic look and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my keys and headed straight to the Ridgeview HOA office. It was a fancy building with marble floors and shiny glass windows sitting right in the middle of town like some sort of castle. The sign out front read, "Ridgeview Estates HOA, protecting your community." I parked in visitor parking and stormed inside. The receptionist, a young woman with a stiff ponytail and a plastic smile, greeted me like I was a nuisance. "Can I help you?" she said in a voice that made it clear she didn't actually want to. "Yes," I said tightly. "You're trying to shut off my water for non-payment, but I'm not even part of your HOA." She tapped something into her computer and frowned. "Address?" she asked. I gave it to her. Her frown deepened. "Looks like... yes." Your property was recently annexed into Ridgeview HOA jurisdiction. My stomach dropped. What? She nodded. Yup. Filed 3 days ago. Here's the paperwork. She handed me a printout. I scanned it quickly. There it was, a forged document claiming that my ranch had voted to join the HOA, signed in shaky, unfamiliar handwriting by Mason Dawson. I almost laughed. Almost. It was so ridiculous it was insulting. I shoved the paper back at her. This is fake. I never signed anything. She shrugged. Take it up with the board. I didn't wait for an invitation. I marched down the hall toward the boardroom, ignoring her protests. The door was closed, but I could hear voices inside, familiar ones. Karen and a few of her minions from the HOA. And once the water's off, Karen was saying, he'll have no choice but to leave. He can't survive without it. No one can. A chorus of laughter followed. I slammed the door open. The room went dead silent. Karen's smile froze on her face. I walked straight to the head of the table and slammed my deed onto it. This, I said, my voice low and dangerous, is the only document that matters. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Karen recovered first. She stood up, smoothing her pink blazer. You're trespassing, Mason, she said sweetly. This is a private meeting. I leaned in close enough to see the fee. I'm not leaving until you fix this, I said. You forged my signature, that's a felony. And if you don't cancel that shutoff order, you're all going to jail. The board members started whispering among themselves. One of them, Mr. Jenkins, an old man with shaky hands, spoke up. Karen, is this true? Karen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. Of course not. Mason's confused. Old age does that. I laughed, a short, humorless bark. You want to test that theory in court? I said, because I already have the sheriff on speed dial. For the first time, real panic flashed across Karen's face. She turned to the board. Let's table this discussion. No need to overreact. Mr. Jenkins nodded eagerly. Yes, yes. Let's not escalate. Another board member, a woman named Nancy, stood up. I move that we rescind the annexation paperwork immediately. The others quickly agreed. Within minutes, they drafted a statement reversing the fake annexation. I made them all sign it, with my phone recording every second. Karen signed last, her hand trembling with rage. As I turned to leave, she hissed under her breath, You'll regret this. I smiled coldly. I already regret ever trusting you to stay in your own lane. When I got back to the ranch, I called Ridgeview Utilities. The same guy who had been ready to shut off my water answered, All good, Mr. Dawson? Orders just came in. Your account's fine, no shutoff. Relief flooded through me. I had won, for now, but I knew it wasn't over. That night, as I sat on the porch watching stars blink into life, another car pulled up my driveway. This time, it wasn't Karen or Daniel. It was a sheriff's cruiser. Deputy Carter got out, looking grim. Mason, he said, we have a problem. I stood up slowly. What now? He held out a piece of paper, an official court summons. Karen had filed a lawsuit against me, claiming emotional distress, harassment, and illegally preventing the transfer of property rights to her family. It was laughable, but it was also real. I would have to go to court, spend time, spend money, fight a legal battle. Exactly what Karen wanted. Carter clapped me on the shoulder. Don't worry. Anyone with eyes can see what's going on here. You'll win. But winning wasn't the point. Karen didn't care about winning. She cared about wearing me down, exhausting me, breaking me. Thanks for listening. And looking at the thick stack of paperwork in Carter's hands, I realized she might just succeed if I wasn't careful. The court date came faster than I expected. 1 minute, I was patching fences on the ranch, trying to live my life. And the next, I was standing in the dusty lobby of the county courthouse, clutching a stack of legal papers and wondering how things had gotten so bad so quickly. I wore my best pair of jeans, a clean button-up shirt, and my old boots polished to a shine. I wasn't going to show up looking like someone who didn't belong. I belonged on that ranch. I had every right to be there. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Emotional distress? I hissed, slamming security footage of Karen on the table. Let's discuss the distress of watching vultures circle your home. When I entered the courtroom, Karen was already there sitting at the plaintiff's table with Daniel beside her. Both of them were dressed like they were attending a movie premiere. Karen in a bright red dress and pearls. Daniel in a sharp gray suit that looked 2 sizes too small. Karen shot me a smug look as I walked in. Daniel didn't even look up from his phone. Their lawyer, a short man with thick glasses, shuffled a pile of papers in front of him, his face twisted into a fake, sympathetic smile. I ignored them all and found my seat at the defendant's table. The judge entered a few minutes later, a tall, no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. All rise, the bailiff called. We stood. The judge sat. Be seated, she said briskly. She glanced down at the file in front of her, flipping through pages. Then she looked up, fixing Karen's lawyer with a pointed stare. Mr. Davis, you're representing the plaintiff? She asked. Yes, Your Honor, the lawyer chirped. And Mr. Dawson, you are representing yourself? Yes, ma'am, I said clearly. She nodded. Very well. Let's begin. Karen's lawyer wasted no time. He stood adjusting his tie and launched into a dramatic speech about how poor Karen had suffered emotional distress, how she had merely tried to secure a home for her beloved son, and how I had bullied and intimidated her, causing her to lose sleep, suffer anxiety, and even miss important social events. I almost laughed out loud. The way he told it, you'd think I had been sneaking onto Karen's property at night, shaking her windows, and stealing her garden gnomes. Karen sniffled loudly at all the right moments, dabbing at imaginary tears with a silk handkerchief. Daniel sat back in his chair, arms folded, a smirk playing on his lips. When it was my turn, I stood slowly and faced the judge. Your Honor, I began, keeping my voice calm and steady. I have lived on my ranch for 20 years. I bought it fair and square. It has never been part of the Ridgeview HOA. I have never signed any paperwork to change that. I pulled out copies of my deed, property line maps, and the county's official records showing I was not under HOA jurisdiction. I placed them neatly on the evidence table. As for harassment, I said, looking Karen straight in the eye, I have video evidence, multiple recordings showing Mrs. Whitmore and her son trespassing, attempting to move into my home without permission, and falsely claiming ownership. The judge nodded, reviewing the documents carefully. Karen's lawyer objected several times, claiming the evidence was unfair and taken out of context. The judge overruled him every time. Then came the videos. I had set up a slideshow on a USB stick, and one by one, the courtroom watched footage of Karen stomping around my front yard, Daniel laughing about kicking the old man out, the moving truck unloading furniture onto my porch, and Karen herself shouting orders at hired movers. By the time the last clip played, the judge's face was like stone. Karen squirmed in her seat. Daniel looked pale. Their lawyer fumbled with his papers, muttering under his breath. The judge set down her pen and folded her hands. I have seen enough, she said firmly. Mrs. Whitmore, your behavior has been outrageous. You had no legal right to annex Mr. Dawson's property, forge documents, or attempt to forcibly remove him from his home. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but the judge held up a hand to silence her. This court finds in favor of the defendant, Mr. Mason Dawson. Case dismissed. Relief washed over me like a cool wave on a hot day. But the judge wasn't finished. She turned to me. Mr. Dawson, if you wish to file a countersuit for damages, the court will hear it. I hadn't thought about that. Sue Karen. drag her through what she had put me through. Part of me wanted to say yes, make her pay for every sleepless night, every angry phone call, every insult. But then I looked at Karen. She was slumped in her seat, beaten. Daniel was sitting there hollow-eyed, no longer smirking. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. Karen had ruined herself trying to ruin me. No, Your Honor, I said quietly. I just want to go home. The judge smiled faintly. A wise choice. She banged her gavel, and just like that, it was over. As I walked out of the courtroom, Karen didn't even look at me. Daniel did. For a second, something almost like regret flickered in his eyes, but then he looked away. Outside, the sun was shining. Birds chirped. The world kept turning. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in months. I was free. The ranch was safe. At least that's what I thought until I got home. There sitting on my porch swing was a man I had never seen before. He wore a crisp black suit and polished shoes. He stood when he saw me approach, extending a hand. Mason Dawson? He asked. I nodded wearily. My name's Trevor Price. I'm a real estate developer. I've been trying to buy this ranch for a long time. Karen Whitmore promised it to me once her son was settled. I stiffened. Here we go again. She was wrong, I said. This land isn't for sale. Trevor smiled, all polished teeth and empty charm. Everyone's got a price, Mr. Dawson. I'm prepared to offer you $500,000 cash. I stared at him. $500,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. More money than I probably ever would again. But when I looked out at my land, the fields, stables, the old oak tree where my father used to sit and tell stories, I knew my answer without even thinking. No deal, I said. Trevor's smile didn't waver. Think about it, he said smoothly. I'll be in touch. He handed me a business card and sauntered off down the driveway to a waiting black SUV. I watched him go, my stomach twisting. I had won the battle against Karen, but a bigger war was coming. And this time it wasn't just about greed. It was about power. It was survival. And it was just getting started. For days after Trevor Price showed up, things stayed quiet. Too quiet. There were no more trucks pulling up my driveway. No more fake court cases. No Karen planting banners on my lawn. It almost felt like the worst had passed. Almost. But deep inside, I knew the silence wasn't peace. It was the heavy, tense kind of silence you get right before a tornado tears the roof off your house. I kept working the ranch, trying to stay focused. I patched fences, fixed the roof on the chicken coop, even planted some new wildflowers along the driveway. Life had to go on no matter how many snakes were slithering in the grass. And for a little while, it worked. Then one night around midnight, my dogs went crazy. I woke up to their barking, loud and fierce. I grabbed my flashlight and my shotgun and rushed out onto the porch. The beam of my flashlight swept across the front yard and caught movement near the stables. Two men in dark clothes running. One was carrying a can, gasoline. The other had something small and silver in his hand, a lighter. My heart stopped. They were trying to set my barn on fire. I didn't think. I just acted. I pumped a shell into the shotgun and fired a warning shot into the air. Boom. The sound echoed across the fields like thunder. The men dropped the gas can and took off, running toward a black pickup parked near the road. I sprinted after them as fast as I could, yelling for them to stop, but they were faster. They jumped into the truck, tires screaming against the dirt, and sped off into the night. I stood there panting, shotgun still in my hands, watching the tail lights disappear. The dogs circled around me, barking and growling. I turned back toward the barn. Thankfully, they hadn't lit anything yet. The gas can sat in the dirt, its top still sealed. I picked it up carefully, heart pounding. This wasn't just trespassing. This was arson. They had tried to destroy my home, and something deep and primal inside me snapped. I was done playing nice. I went back inside and called Deputy Carter. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. Mason? They just tried to burn my barn down, I said tightly. Silence for a beat. Then I'm on my way. By the time Carter and another deputy arrived, I had photographs of the gas can, the tire tracks, and a short video from my security cameras showing the two men sneaking around the barn. Carter whistled low when he saw the footage. Looks like you've made some powerful enemies, he said grimly. I don't care who they are, I said. I'm not backing down. Carter clapped me on the shoulder. Good, because they're playing dirty now. He took the gas can as evidence and promised to pull prints off it. Before he left, he gave me some advice. Start locking everything. Double lock it. Install more cameras. Maybe even get a few more dogs. Whoever's behind this isn't going to stop easy. I nodded. I already knew. The next day, I installed 4 new cameras around the property, high, hidden, and with night vision. I reinforced the barn doors with steel bars. I even bought 2 more guard dogs from a breeder in town. Big, mean-looking German shepherds named Duke and Shadow. If they wanted to fight, they were going to get one. For a few days, things stayed quiet again. No strange cars, no mysterious men, no more fires. I started to believe maybe I had scared them off. But Trevor Price wasn't done yet. A week later, a letter arrived by certified mail. It was from Ridgeview County. Inside was a notice of eminent domain. Trevor had convinced the county to declare my ranch needed for public development. A fancy way of saying they could steal my land if they claimed it was for the greater good. And guess who was listed as the proposed buyer? Trevor Price Enterprises. I felt sick. Eminent domain was supposed to be used for highways or schools, not luxury resorts, but money talks. And Trevor clearly had a lot of it. I drove straight to the county office, stormed in, and demanded a meeting with the director of land management, a wiry man named Mr. Hargrove, who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in 10 years. This is illegal, I said, slapping the notice onto his desk. He adjusted his glasses, peering at me like I was a minor inconvenience. Sir, the county has determined that Crescent Ranch is the ideal location for future housing development. You'll be compensated fairly. I leaned over his desk, my hands planted firmly. This is my home, my family's history, my life, and you're selling it to a developer who tried to burn me out in the middle of the night. Hargrove had the nerve to smile. Prove it. I stared at him, rage and helplessness warring inside me. They didn't care. They didn't care about right or wrong. They cared about money. And Trevor was waving a lot of it around. When I got back home, I sat on the porch swing and stared out at the land I loved so much. The rolling hills, the stables, the creek winding through the fields. All of it under threat. All of it could be gone unless I fought back harder than ever before. I spent the next 2 days gathering everything I had. Photos, videos, police reports, historical records showing how long the ranch had been in my family. I even found old newspaper articles about my grandfather building the stables by hand after World War II. I created a file so thick it barely fit into a binder. And then I took it to the only place that could stop Trevor Price, the local news station. The reporter's name was Abby Collins, a tough young woman with a sharp mind and a reputation for taking down bullies. I laid it all out for her. Karen's fake HOA games, the lawsuit, the arson attempt, the eminent domain scam. By the time I finished talking, Abby's eyes were blazing. This is going to make one heck of a story, she said. 2 days later, it did. Local rancher battles corrupt developer in land grab scandal. The headline screamed. The news report went viral. People across the county, heck, across the whole state were outraged. They flooded the county office with angry calls and emails. They showed up at town hall meetings, waving signs and chanting, "Save Crescent Ranch." They shouted, "Protect our land." Suddenly, the county officials who had been so ready to sell me out were sweating bullets. And Trevor Price? He went into full damage control mode. He tried to spin it, saying he was bringing progress to the area. Nobody bought it. His office was bombarded with protesters. His face was plastered all over the news as a greedy developer trying to steal a veteran's ranch. I wasn't just fighting alone anymore. The whole community was behind me. 1 week later, the county officially withdrew the eminent domain claim. They issued a public apology, and Trevor Price's company lost several huge contracts, millions of dollars, because of the bad press. Karen? She disappeared from Ridgeview. Word was she moved out of state to live with a cousin. Daniel, too. And just like that, the nightmare was over. Almost. One evening, as I stood on the porch watching the sun sink low over the fields, a battered black pickup pulled slowly down my driveway. I tensed, ready for anything. But when the truck stopped and the door opened, it wasn't Trevor or Karen. It was an older man with a white beard and kind eyes. He walked up to me and extended a hand. "You're Mason Dawson?" he asked. I nodded. "My name's Earl. I own the hardware store in town. My granddaddy used to tell me stories about your grandpa. Good man, hard worker. Just wanted to say we're glad you stood your ground." He pressed something into my hand, a small medal. It was a simple thing, bronze and worn, but the words on it hit me straight in the chest. "For courage and honor." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered. He tipped his hat and drove off into the sunset. I stood there a long time after he left, turning the medal over and over in my hand. The ranch was safe, the battle over. But as Madison's car vanished, I unfolded her father's note. 3 words explained why Karen truly wanted my land, and why her war had always been about more than a house. A few months had passed since the battle over my land ended. Things had finally gone back to normal, or as close to normal as they could be after everything that happened. The town had rallied around me. People I barely knew would wave at me when I passed by or stop me in the grocery store to say, "Good job." Or, "You showed them what it means to stand your ground." They even invited me to speak at a local town hall about property rights and small town pride. Me, a simple rancher, standing in front of a crowd like some kind of hero. But I didn't feel like one. I had fought because I had no choice. I just wanted to be left alone to live my life in peace. That's all I ever wanted. Still, I was grateful. Things were quiet now. The fields were green, the animals healthy, and the birds were singing again like they had forgotten all about the chaos that nearly tore this place apart. One morning, I was out near the stable feeding Duke and Shadow, my 2 German shepherds, when I noticed something strange down by the road. A car, not just any car, a sleek, dark blue sedan, shiny and expensive looking, parked just beyond the edge of my property. It wasn't moving. I narrowed my eyes, tossed the rest of the dog food into their bowls, and made my way down the gravel path toward the driveway gate. As I got closer, I saw someone sitting inside, a woman. She had short dark hair, sunglasses on, and was staring straight at the house. She looked familiar. I approached cautiously, one hand resting on the gate latch. "Can I help you?" I called out. The woman slowly got out of the car. She took off her sunglasses and I froze. Madison Whitmore, Daniel's fiancée or ex-fiancée, I guessed. Since the last time I saw her, she had been just a name on a banner hanging off the side of a moving truck. She looked nervous. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. "You probably don't remember me." "Oh, I remember," I said coolly. She nodded, biting her lip. I deserve that. I just. I needed to see this place for myself. Daniel used to talk about it like it was already his, like your ranch was his birthright. I didn't say anything. She looked away, embarrassed. I had no idea what was really going on until it was too late. He lied to me, said you were giving him the ranch, said you were old, sick, and didn't need it anymore. That part stung more than I expected. "I'm not sick," I said quietly. She gave me a sad smile. "No, you're not. He was the sick one, and so was his mother." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. This was supposed to be a wedding gift from my dad. He wanted us to build something for ourselves, not steal it from someone else. She handed me the envelope. I hesitated. What is this? I asked. Just open it when you're ready, she said. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for everything. She got back into the car, started it, and drove off without another word. I stood there for a while, watching the dust settle in the air long after her car disappeared down the road. Then I opened the envelope. Inside was a check, not just any check. A certified cashier's check made out to me for $750,000. I stared at it, stunned. Attached was a note handwritten in neat block letters. Mr. Dawson, this land belongs to people like you, not like Karen. If you ever want to expand, invest, or just take a break from the madness, this is for you. No strings attached. Thomas G. Maxwell. Her father. I remembered now. Thomas Maxwell, owner of Maxwell Timber Supply, one of the largest businesses in the state. He was old school, a self-made man, known for playing fair and living honest. I held the check like it might explode in my hands. This wasn't just money. It was recognition. It was justice. It was a way to turn the pain and chaos into something new. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat out on the porch with Duke and Shadow, staring up at the stars and thinking about everything that had happened. Karen and her lies, Daniel and his arrogance, Trevor Price and his shady deals. And now this, a gift, a chance to build, grow, or maybe just breathe. But I wasn't ready to leave the ranch. No, this land had been fought for by my father, my grandfather, and now by me. I wasn't going anywhere, but I could build. A few weeks later, I broke ground on something new. Not a mansion, not a resort, a training center for young ranchers, veterans, and anyone who wanted to learn how to live off the land. I called it Whitestone Acres, named after the white stones my grandfather used to line the fence by the old oak tree. People came from across the state. Some came to learn how to farm. Some came just to breathe again away from the city and stress. And a few came because they had been hurt like I was and needed to find their footing again. I welcomed them all. And somehow the ranch felt bigger than ever. Not in size, but in spirit. It wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. A place to rebuild. A place to heal. One crisp autumn morning, as I stood watching a group of kids learn how to ride for the first time, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned. Deputy Carter stood there with a grin on his face. "You really did it," he said, looking around. "I had help," I said. He nodded slowly. "You know, I heard Trevor Price lost everything. Contracts gone. Blacklisted in 3 counties." "Good," I said. "And Karen?" I smiled. No one's seen her since she tried to sue the mayor of Scottsdale for stealing her sunshine. We both laughed. Then Carter looked serious. "Proud of you, Mason." That meant more than he knew. As he walked off, I looked out over the land one more time. The wind stirred the tall grass. Horses galloped in the distance. Laughter echoed from the training paddock. This was home. My legacy. Not just what you inherit, but what you protect, what you fight for. And no matter who came knocking next, I was ready.